I see you hiding in the back there. Are you in charge of the live stream? Is that what it is, Paul?
This is all just for the one virtual session that we're doing.
Oh, nice. I have time. 10:15 is what they told you on the schedule, wasn't it?
Yeah, you can rock and roll.
Alrighty. Set myself my timer here so I don't go absolutely crazy with the time. All right. This might be the first time I've been at a presentation where I actually recognize every single person in the room. I just saw you. This is awesome. All right, this is a little bit different than the keynote. What I want to do is I want to get into, and I'm going to skip all my introduction because you guys all saw me like 5 minutes ago. What I want to do is we're going to look at kind of that people element of project management. And we're going to look at some things that you can apply not only as a future-looking project manager, but also to kind of understand how some organizational dynamics work based on what research tells us how people see their job. Because one of the challenges that we have in organizations is that everybody has a different perspective. But we always try to apply these kind of one-size-fits-all solutions to every single thing that we do in our organizations with how we deal with other people. And that's part of that is because of the litigious nature of society, that we don't want to have different rules for this person, different rules for that person, because that's just a lawsuit that's going to happen. You can tell I'm real fond of the lawsuit thing. So the thing we're going to talk about today is we're going to look at how different people perceive the purpose of their organization. So how they see their why, what is the organization attempting to do, and we're going to look at some different dynamics of the population within your workforce that apply to every large organization. And I'm going to give you some tips and clues on how to leverage each of those types of people, what you can get from them, how to get it, and most importantly, what do they need to keep giving it to you. So why are we here? Well, like I said, we're here to look at the purpose of organizations and figure out just kind of what does that even mean. And this is particularly important for future-facing organizations. A lot of organizations currently have just kind of lived on this idea that they exist, therefore they exist. You think about the organizations around, whether it's a governmental organization or it's like a large blue chip type company, they just exist, they just are. But we need to refine that a little bit. We need to figure out not only what does that organization exist for, but also what is the purpose of all the breakdowns and substructures within that organization? Because that's very, very important for the individual you expect to work for you on your projects. We want the person to be connected with that purpose however they see it. We're going to look at how the workforce is distributed as far as how people see purpose and how they see their role in fulfilling that purpose. This one I expect to surprise a few people. Has anybody here been to like the HR, did you go to the HR1 conference or? All right. There's a little bit of material I used from that in here. So don't want to bore people. And now we're going to look at kind of the care and feeding of people, and we're going to look at kind of how do we get the most out of them? How do we get the value from that distribution? And one of the key important things here is that this distribution we're talking about applies to all organizations that are really above the size of a startup. So if you have more than about 50 employees, this is going to apply to you in one way, shape, or form. Now, looking at purpose, I want to know what you think purpose is. If I asked you what's the purpose of your organization, what would you base that answer on? Or what would you tell me? Okay, so you'd give me the plaque on the wall, right? Objectives, goals, motivations. So something between a mission statement and a set of things you do. Yeah, purpose is ultimately the driver of those things. It's not any of these. It's the underlying thing that tells us why our organization exists. And this means not just the top level organization. When I used to work in the federal government, we had this horrible, horrible tendency that if you worked at the training academy, and the training academy was in the central region, which was in the central, you know how the organizations work. Somewhere in your organization, there is the accounting team for the basement elevator maintenance crew in the central building, and they are on their little branch of the org chart. We had this horrible tendency within the Federal Aviation Administration for people to grab that top level organizational mission, which was ensure the safe and efficient operation of the National Airspace System, and drag that verbatim all the way down to the basement elevator accounting team. What's wrong with that? Does that top level mission, the highest order thing you apply, the thing that's on the wall, does that actually represent what that basement accounting team does? What their reason is to exist? Got a couple of this. We have audience participation. You guys can shout out here. I don't care. It's fine. So, does that represent? Does that top level? It contributes. There's some contribution there. But if somebody asked that basement elevator accounting crew, do you personally, in the tasks you do every day, does that ensure the safe and efficient operation of a national airspace system? I don't think any sane person would say yes, right? Now, what you do something that does something that helps somebody, that facilitates something, enables something that eventually pays for a lunch, and then somewhere over here, there's a dent. But you're looking at like 25 layers. And the challenge with purpose is purpose has to connect with all the whys all the way down there. Grabbing the top-level mission statement or top-level vision statement or whatever, top-level objectives, and dragging those all the way down to an organization that you have to kind of squint and stand on one foot to see the connection, that is a horrible way to disconnect your workforce from your work. When I worked at the Federal Aviation Administration Training Academy, and I had several jobs. I had lots and lots of jobs in that organization. But one of the last jobs I had there, I worked at the Training Academy. And every day, when we had our little stand-up meeting, they would say something about, we ensure the safe operation of the National Airspace System. And I said, do we? And the challenge is that even the leadership had bought into that. At least the leadership at that level. They had bought into this because it was just a convention, that we do whatever the whole organization does. When in truth, I worked in an academic operation. My real job, was to make sure that this technician has the skills they need to go work on that boiler system to make sure that air traffic control tower stays operational during the winter so that aircraft and airports can operate safely. So there's a few layers. And as soon as you can draw those connections, that starts making the job more clear to people. The challenges in our workforce, or one of the challenges in our workforce, and this will kind of materialize as we go along, is that the individual worker quite often only has the letterhead to tell them what this is, to tell them what the why is. They just have whatever the boss says it is we do. And if the boss is grabbing for that top-level organizational mission, saying, why, yeah, we... something Commonwealth. That's what we do. They are going to work to try to figure out how it is that they do. Or they're going to disconnect and just say, yeah, that's what we do. And they'll go on with their day, in which case they will have no purpose other than to do whatever they're told at the moment. And that can be a dangerous place for our workforce. Now, we want to make sure that the purpose applies to each part of the organization. So our basement elevator accounting technician crew, What is it that they do? We need to figure that out. Not the least of which is that we have to continue to be able to justify their existence. Or at least maybe even not even justify it. In a more practical, future-looking term, we're not trying to justify their position. We're trying to see if we actually need them or not. Or does that function need to be moved somewhere else? So part of this, as a leadership person, and as somebody who's going to be part of one of those extended projectized organizations, a big part of this is making sure that you are exercising that stewardship, that you have the accounting services the elevator basement crew needs, but also making a decision that do they need a dedicated team to do that, or could it be a shared service with another accounting department? And exercising your stewardship, exercising your responsibility to make sure that your resources are organized appropriately. That's another big part of this. And if you don't know the why, if you cannot clearly explain and articulate the why for the basement elevator accounting crew, do they even have a why? Maybe not, right? Most of us have been around long enough that we've seen that one project, that one program that existed for the sole purpose of keeping somebody employed until they got to retirement. We have totally seen that. If you've been around any length of time at all, you've seen that. True story, we had a aviation safety inspector branch manager. He kind of liked to do computer programming. And on his own, he created something, some kind of a tracking system in Fortran, and he set it up, put it in a little rack inside of a locker in his office, got it plugged into the system, started using it informally. Eventually, it became codified in the statutes for aircraft inspections. Then he retired. It took 6 months for the IT people to find that computer after the system crashed. There was never resources dedicated to it. There was no formal piece of it. It actually contributed a pretty valuable service to the agency in form of data collection, in form of keeping us aware of certain things and doing certain safety inspections. Aircraft are very well regulated and very, very tightly inspected. The challenge is even though that actually had some sort of a why, there was a purpose for it, it had a use and was used, it wasn't mapped to the cosmology of whys in the organization. There was no support for it. There was no redundancy for it. So the necessary structures weren't in place to allow us to keep using it. When they did eventually find it, about 2 years later, they managed to find somebody who could spell Fortran and contracted with them and had them converted into something else and made it back into a live system again, very heavily updated, heavily modified system. But for roughly 3 years in there, the system that had been integral to aircraft inspection for almost 10 years was just gone. All because somebody who saw a why didn't then connect it back, didn't connect the execution of it back to the whole organization. So it's not unidirectional. It's not top-down, this is why you're here, but there's also a bottom-up understanding why the people and the systems and devices and procedures and all that exist. And that has to be included, sorry for that, that has to be included in all of this why. Ultimately, if we had perfect knowledge of our organization, we would know why there's a specific number of chairs in here at this moment in time, or why there's a certain piece of software on that computer back there in a perfect world. But at least as a project leader, or even just a manager, even just a supervisor or team leader, we should be able to explain the why for our major systems, and most importantly, our people. Because people are that really, really, really necessary critical system. Purpose is why. Purpose is not what, purpose is not how, purpose is why. Any further reading on that, I will refer to Simon Sinek. Get back there. This thing is not liking my clicker. Works so much better downstairs. So, what is the significance, or let me ask you, how would you describe 1/3 of your workforce? Do you think 1/3 of your workforce believes they're working just a job? Or do you think 1/3 of your workforce sees it as a career? Maybe 1/3 of your workforce believes it's their life calling. What percentage of your workforce do you think believe it is a life calling? Like that is the thing they are born to do? 10%? Reasonable guess? Now, does that matter at what level in the organization they are? So would you expect like 10% of janitors to believe it's a calling, or 10% of CEOs to believe it's a calling? Okay, some more senior-ish. Any other guesses? $25, okay. So we're going for a quarter believe it's a calling, but a quarter of senior people. So, any other guesses? Just what's your wild guess based on your conversations in your workforce? Do you think most of your people or less people believe it's a calling? Like 5%? Now, does that depend on what level in the organization it is? So 5% more senior, maybe less down lower? Reasonable guess? Yeah. You're hiding off on the side over here. Yeah. All right. Reasonable guesses. Now, they did some research on this. It's been done a few different times. In that magical research place, a hospital. Now, hospitals are kind of cool for research because, well, there's a lot of nurses getting their PhDs, so they do a lot of research in hospitals. And a lot of them are doing management research, so we talk about personnel, we talk about different things like that. But hospitals also have this really cool division in their workforce that if you think about the senior people, you think about the most highly skilled, highly educated, highly dedicated people, you're probably thinking like a brain surgeon, right? That'd be reasonable. You think of a brain surgeon or maybe a cancer doctor or something like that. Somebody, ooh, man, they went to school for like 86 years to be able to take that job. And if you think kind of at the bottom, you think more the bottom of the workforce, you're thinking like the janitor or maybe a nursing assistant or something like that, right? So there's this huge span in a hospital. I mean, people that are, say at the top in their profession, they're very clearly at the top. They're not a senior technician above a junior technician. They're making $500,000 a year and flying jets around and whatever it is that they do. And then at the bottom, you've got people that are probably part-time assistants, and they change bed sheets and stuff. So it's a cool dynamic in a hospital. You have not only do they have a massive workforce, especially in a research hospital, you might have a couple thousand people that work in that building, but you also have this enormous span between the top and bottom. But what they found in these workforces, in these hospitals, when they try to analyze whether people, and they did a few different ways. They asked people, but they also observed them, and they also did listening sessions and stuff with them, a few different studies. They found out that 1/3 of the workforce believed it was a job. 1/3 of the workforce believed it was a career. 1/3 of the workforce believed it was a calling. And it doesn't matter what level of the organization you're in. 1/3 of brain surgeons view their position as just a job. 1/3 of janitors view it as their life calling. And that entire division, as well as being somewhat linked to where they are in their life at that point in time, and we'll get a bunch of that stuff going, but it also has to do with their perception of the why of their position. A brain surgeon sees the job as just a job, sees the position as just a job, if their life actualization is mostly outside of work, and they come in, they do what they got to do, patch the veins, fix the brain, whatever it is they got to do, and then they put that aside and they go back to their ski lodge, whatever it is. The janitor views it as a life calling because they see their purpose not as changing and inventorying linens, but their job is to ensure a clean and sanitary environment for somebody to recover. Notice, they're not grabbing onto some top-level mission. They're just interpreting the why of their own personal actions in a way that makes sense to a greater purpose to them. There's a good chance that nobody told that janitor, hey, if you do your job right, people will live longer. But the janitor probably figured that out because they understand what they do, sanitation, all that kind of stuff. And nobody ever told the brain surgeon, like, just mail it in, dude. Yeah. Unless they're talking about it as like student loan check or something. But it just evolves that way in a workforce. There are a lot of factors to it, but I want you to keep in mind that this is uniform in any sufficiently large workforce. In a startup where everybody's drank the Kool-Aid, everybody's on board, they were all there, they all own stock, whatever it is, they're rah-rah involved, like all 6 of them. They're probably all in the calling thing. But you have this division from the perspective of the employee. Odds are 1/3 of you, 1/3 of the employees, or even really 1/3 of the people here. Although people that are likely to come to a conference are probably more likely to be career people, or more likely to be calling people, unless you were told to be here. Boss said, totally happens. But this division is there, and importantly, this is not a hierarchy. There's no hierarchy to this. There is no job bad, calling good. There's no hierarchy here, but the workforce is divided this way. So what do these even mean? Well, a job, and these probably mean very much what your intuition tells you. If you look at a job, somebody who views their position or their occupation as a job, and importantly, that's how they view it right now, not necessarily how they're going to view it in 5 years. This is how they view it right now, is that whatever they do to get a paycheck is the thing they do so that they can afford to do the rest of their life. Whether that's raise their family, whether that's finish their college, whether that's take a trip to Fiji twice a year, whatever it is, they show up, they do their job, they diligently do their job, and they move on. They get no self-actualization from showing up to work every day. Yeah, maybe they have some friends, maybe they've got coworkers they hang out with, but that's not the reason they're there. They're there to enable the rest of their life. Career people, tell them we said hi. Career people see, their identity is connected a little more closely to usually the organization. Career people see the occupation or position they have as a path to make a better life. They're not funding what's outside, they're discovering what's inside. Now, this does not necessarily mean linear advancement or anything like that. It could include a lot of other things, and we'll talk about kind of how to manifest this in people as we go. But again, it's not a hierarchy. It's not better to be a career than a job. Everybody's diligent, everybody does what they need to do. We just have to be able to communicate them what that is and why they do it. But career people are a good chunk of folks that stick around for a while. They'll eventually figure out there's a path they can take, there's a place they can stay, that kind of thing. They become career people. And the calling people, this is really irritating me. The calling people, and the calling people can be a little bit of a challenge because the calling people have a personal identity with the thing they're doing, the occupation they're doing. And a challenge with calling people, and kind of a challenge with all of them, but it's more of the calling person, is that it's their perception, their belief about what they think the situation is, what they think the job is. Years ago, about 2012, about 10 years ago, I took a new position with the Federal Aviation Administration. I went from being kind of a business analyst to being kind of an analytical team lead. I had already done the interviews. I'd already accepted a job. I knew what the company line was. I'd read the letterhead. But it happened to be that I was coming in behind a friend of mine. And I'd already accepted a job. I was going to do the job. But I wanted to talk to her a bit. And she'd been traveling. It's a government thing, and we traveled a lot. And we finally were able to connect about a week before I started. Went and grabbed some lunch, as you do. We started out, we did the usual kind of commiserating about what's going on in the agency, they haven't funded us again, all that kind of stuff, about figuring out, just the stuff we do. But toward the end of the lunch, I said, all right, no kidding, real life, what do you have to do to be successful in this position? What is it that you do in this position every day that is both meeting expectations, but is also fulfilling and successful and moves you forward with your life? She looked me straight in the face and said, every day, I clean out my inbox. That's what she did every day. Now, she was definitely a calling person. She was definitely a calling person. I'm blocking it on purpose. She was definitely a calling person because, see, what she did is her personal identity and her personal belief about the position was that she was there to be an information broker. That's not the job. That is nothing like the job. The job was to be a data analytics team lead and drive the strategy of the organization forward. Our job, what we were supposed to do, was coordinate all the performance metrics across the entire section of the agency and create strategies to help people make those better. That's what the actual mechanics of the job were. But to her, her personal why and why she occupied the position was to be the information broker, was to be the person who had the answer. And it drove her crazy. She would work on weekends, she would stay late, she'd take her computer home. For those keeping score, that's 3 federal law violations. And she would do all that. She would bury herself in work, bury herself in honest, deliberate effort, pull her hair out, give herself an ulcer, all that kind of stuff, to be that information broker because that's what she believed was the function she served. The challenge won the job. Now, I found out sometime later from the manager, from the supervisor, that was part of the reason they found her a job to go somewhere else. Was because as diligent as she was answering email, as diligent she was giving answers to people and providing information, she was not so good with the analytics. And that was the core of the position. Whether or not they handled that appropriately, that's a separate discussion. But the important thing is that she was definitely a calling person. She had a deep personal identity with what she believed the job to be. And she was just wrong. Just flat wrong. So calling people they require a little bit of special handling. And I want you to keep that in mind because if you can get somebody who is a calling person properly aligned with the why, just like that friend of mine, they will kill themselves accomplishing it. They will burn the midnight oil. They will put forward every bit of discretionary effort and time they have to accomplish that. To the point of bending and flexing and moving laws out of the way. They will work at home and answer emails at 9 o'clock at night when they're forbidden to by employment law. So if we have calling people, we want to make sure we're using them correctly. Now, a good part of what I want to get into for the rest of this is, with this perspective, I want to get into kind of what the people need. What do they need, and how do we get that out of them? And what do they give us? Now, our job people and again, not a hierarchy. Our job people are people who are there, they have a very small box they live in. In a way, a job person kind of sees themselves as kind of a cog in the machine. It doesn't mean they don't like it. It doesn't mean they don't enjoy it. It doesn't mean they don't get a little bit of fulfillment from it. It doesn't mean, importantly, that it doesn't mean they don't want to do it well. It just means that they're not focused on all the other stuff. They live in a position quite often in between two processes. And what they need to know are what are the tasks and duties they have to perform in this space. What is it that they're doing that gets the data from over here to the TPS report over here? They need to know what are the connections in there. They need to know boundaries. Now, not boundaries like that friend of mine who really needed some boundaries, but they need to know what are the limits of concern that they have. How far out do they have to stretch their arms before they're in somebody else's cubicle? Because they don't need to go beyond that. But they do need to know where that boundary is, because they do want to do their job. They do want to contribute. But they don't want to, they're not interested in infringing on other people's work, or more importantly, making their own job harder than it has to be. Very importantly, job people need effort-based feedback. They need feedback that allows them to understand the level of effort and work they're putting in. Is that acceptable? Is that achieving the desired results? It doesn't do any good at all to give them strictly results-based feedback. Because remember, this is not their life. A job person, by definition, their life is somewhere else. So they're constantly trying to modulate how much emotion and how much effort and how much drive they put in. And again, they want to be able to do this. Yes?
So would you say they're incentive-based as well?
Not usually. Not usually. And that's actually true of the whole workforce generally. Hold that until the end. We'll get back to that, because I think it's going to be important. That's an excellent point. She asked, do you think that they're incentive-based? And most employees are actually not incentive-based above a certain threshold. But we'll have a whole discussion about that toward the end, so save that. I'll look at you like I don't remember what we're talking about. Yeah, but they need effort-based feedback. They need to know, essentially, are they trying hard enough? And more or less, what they're really trying to find out is that, is it worth it for me emotionally to stay here? That's essentially what they're asking. Because effort involves emotion, not just labor. And they need to know the localized why. And by localized why, they need to know specifically, why does this gap exist? Why does this data have to get from this side to this report? Your job people can be awesome. They can be great facilitators of improvement in your organization if you can get that down. If you can get them to understand why they exist, and importantly, and this is critical for everybody, whatever why you communicate to them has to be coherent with their experience. That's why that grabbing the top level mission thing doesn't work, because it's not coherent. The basement elevator accounting team does not ensure the safe and efficient use of the National Airspace System. They maybe help out a couple of people and make sure that an elevator doesn't kill anybody, but maybe. But they certainly don't do that other stuff, so it's not coherent with their experiences. But the job people need a coherent why that matches the actual tasks and actual experiences they have. If you tell them that they're providing some critical service that they don't do, and believe me, they know what they're doing. And if you tell them they're doing something they're not doing, then one of you has got some explaining to do. Now, what we get from our job people is very, very good process error detection. They will tell us, because they want to do a good job, they want to be efficient, they want to be effective, and they will tell us how many times they have to pick up this, give it back to somebody else. Pick up this, give it back to somebody else. They will tell us that that is happening too much, that whatever they're getting is not satisfactory for the job, the why that you've told them, if it doesn't match up with the process you told them to use. They have exquisite in-position efficiency. Remember, they view themselves as more or less a cog in the machine. They are there to accomplish tasks, to put in their good 8 hours, to do a good job, and then get the heck out of there. They are not there to spin their wheels, fix other people's problems. They are there to do whatever it is they're supposed to do. And they have very good boxed commitment, meaning that contract that we have with them, establishing that why, telling them, we need you to do these tasks in this way with these tools. If they're on board with it, if it's within their within their effort acceptance, and all the pay and benefits and stuff are satisfactory, they're adequate, they're on board for good. Because their life is not there. If that meets the needs they have to keep surfing on the weekends or whatever it is that they do with their life, as long as that does it, they're there forever. Now, that is not to say that people's needs and things change, because at each one of these things, the job, career, calling, each one of these is a snapshot of a person at a moment in time. Nobody is a job person forever. Nobody is a career person forever. And you can swap back and forth. Think about a job person. Think about somebody who was a career person and has now become a job person. Keeping in mind what the key function of a job person is. Think about the kinds of things that could have caused that. Again, they're not going backward. Their perception has changed. Anybody have a sick relative? Baby? Yeah. Starting a small business, have a, whatever. There's all kinds of things that can cause you to focus your attention outside of work. That you're no longer interested in the interconnectedness and stuff in the job. You just now need to do what you got to do to get your paycheck to go back and deal with what the rest of your life is. Hopefully it's all good stuff, but acknowledge that it's not. It's not always good stuff. And that fundamental change doesn't change any of this. Because the main differentiator of a job person is that their focus is outside of work. They need to do what they're going to do in work. They need to have clear expectations, clear boundaries, clear understanding of what it is they do and why they're there, so that they can do that, do it well, and then get on with whatever's got their attention outside the job. Our career people, again, these are the people who see the career, see the job, or see the organization as kind of a path to some sort of growth. Our career people, they need interface knowledge. Now, where our job people, they need to know where the boundaries of the cubicle are. They need to know what their input side is, what their output side is, what materials and what things go from one side to the other. Our career people need to feel out. They need to know, where does this come from? What's happening over here? Where does that data come from? Okay, who's got their hands on it over here? Likewise, they need to know where their outputs go, and they need to know where it touches. Career people, a career person working in the basement is going to want to know who the basement elevator accounting crew is. They just need to know what touches what. They need peer support and peer referencing. A lot of our people that come in that are career people, they develop a cohort. They will connect with people of a similar position or similar status, and we're not talking like specifically mentorship per se. We're talking peer connections, that at some point in their job, they were a peer level person, or maybe plus or minus a little bit, but they've got people they can reference to be able to gauge their progress in the organization. They also need connections. These are inside and outside the organization. This is just like that interface knowledge. They need to know the people. They need to know the offices. They need to know the phone numbers and stuff. They need to know who to call if there's a problem. That friend of mine, a lot of people connected with her because she was the person they could call for an answer. And it worked out that their career need met her calling need. Career people need absolutely clear opportunity paths. Now, these do not necessarily mean promotions. It's not always about promoting. In the organization I came from, the Federal Aviation Administration, there was a path when I decided I wanted to go be an instructor. There was a path for me to go from being a business analyst to moving over to the Aeronautical Center Academy. There was a way to do that, and it was easy for me to look it up. It was a lateral. Actually, it was kind of a small pay cut, but it was a lateral. It was not a promotion. It was nothing anybody had on their wish list, certainly not from the position I went from to that. But there was a clear path to do it. Likewise, there needed to be clear paths for people to go from junior contributor to director of something. It doesn't necessarily have to be easy, but it has to be clear. Expectations have to be clear. Criteria have to be clear. Qualifications have to be clear. Naturally, you'd want to have as much organizational support as possible if you want to keep people inside, but it needs to be clear. There needs to be an intelligible, articulable path from wherever they are in the organization to wherever it is they may want to go. The career people, if we can give them these things, they give us a lot of interface monitoring. Like our job person, job person's keen on what's messing up their job. Our career people are very good at monitoring the interfaces because they're aware of where the moving pieces are in the organization. It's part of their thing. They keep an eye on that. And they're very good at identifying organizational problems, organizational challenges. They're very good at collaborating. A lot of our career people are the ones who will know somebody over in financing who's kind of jumping the chain of command. They'll know somebody in the organization over there because they came in the same hiring cohort or they went to the same HR 302 class or whatever. And they'll call them and say, "Hey, Steve, I heard about this thing. You got any insights on that?" Or, "Hey, Cindy, we got a project coming up. Do you have somebody on your team that can kind of work with this?" And then they will figure out how to do this, how to do the collaborations without involving the whole hierarchy of the organization. Eventually the hierarchy's got to be involved because somebody's going to pay for it. But they will set all that stuff up. And they are huge on equity monitoring. And by equity monitoring, it's just a natural outcome of that need that career people have to have peers that they can reference to. If you three are in a cohort and you're career people, you're monitoring, you're all going to know what each other makes. You're all going to know what your positions are, and you're going to, career people will more or less openly talk about that kind of stuff, regardless of whatever organizational policies. They're probably sidebar. But career people will know. They will know what people make. They will know how long they've been there. They will know what qualifications people have. And importantly, they are that kind of canary in a coal mine for where things are unfair, where things are inequitable. And I mean in a lived, factual sort of way. They will know. And they're good for that, and you can use them for that. You naturally have to open that path for them to do that. Calling people, again, are kind of special. The most important thing calling people need is they have to have purpose parity. Whatever it is that they see themselves as, whether they're the information broker, or they are the diligent analyst, or they are the connector, whatever it is that they see themselves as, that has to match with the needs of their position. So if you have somebody like that friend of mine who was very much the data broker, very much the information broker, that was her personality, she needed to be put in a position of disseminating information to people, of being that person. She would do it better than anybody that ever hired for that position. So they have to match. It has to match. If you don't match this with calling people, they will be a disaster because they will constantly try to do that calling. They will always default to that because that's who they are. Quite literally, it's who they are. They need boundaries, where our job person just needs to know how far to push their arms out. Our calling person needs more of those traditional boundaries. No Darla, put your laptop down, do not answer the phone after 5. Frank, the office isn't open on Saturday. Stop working. Now that may mean you have to monitor them. That may mean you have to look at when their email was sent. Well, let's get a little iffy with some of the Outlook features that are in play now, where you can schedule emails to send at a certain time. But they need boundaries. They need to know a limit to put on their enthusiasm. Again, they're well-intentioned. They fully mean well. Every one of these people, every one of these different types of people means well, but they need boundaries. And calling people need outcome-based feedback. They need to know how what they're doing, because they're always maximum effort, always. But they need to know, are the results they're getting moving the needle? Is what they're doing helping the organization? Is it accomplishing that purpose? That friend of mine? No, not even a little bit. She was not even connected with the purpose of the organization. And she needed that feedback. I don't know that she ever got it. But people, calling people especially, they have to know, how does all that burning the midnight oil, how does that taking their laptop home, how does all that grinding and grinding and grinding contribute to success in the organization? Because that's what they want to accomplish. They want to make a difference in the world, whatever it is. And they need to know how that's happening. Now, what we get from them is outcome-focused effort. Again, if their why matches our why, that's the only thing they're focused on in the whole universe. I mean, it's literally who they are. They're gonna give us great, direct, specific, pointed, outcome-based effort. They are bought in completely. They have huge emotional investment. They are completely bought in, and they give us boundless enthusiasm because it's who they are. But it all hinges on making sure that the why matches what they think it is. Now, for any of these positions, whether it's a job or a career or a calling, I encourage you to kind of consider where you are. Is it a job? You have a lot of stuff going on outside. Is it a career? You're trying to move in the organization or move within the industry. So you identify with the big umbrella you're in. Or is it a calling where the thing you do is who you are? Listen to the water cooler conversations. Listen to the things your peers say. Listen to the things your subordinates say. See if you can pick out what stage they're in. And again, it's just a stage. It's not a life sentence. A job person today can be a calling person tomorrow if they're in the right spot. A calling person today can be a walking disaster if their purposes don't line up. A career person might have a life change and become a job person. None of it's good, bad, or ugly. Everybody's people. And we need to figure out how to get the right person in the right place, give them what they need so we can get what we need out of them. That's the importance of having the right people. Now, just as we're right up on the end of time here, but just to circle back on the incentive thing we're talking about. You want to ask that again? Not. Okay. Okay, yeah, so the question is, are the job people more incentive driven? And I assume, does that mean more incentive driven as compared to the other ones? Generally speaking, no. Because what they're trying to do, now it's a balance, but what your job person is trying to do is they're trying to do enough, they're trying to put forth enough of themselves, enough of their time, enough of their effort, to get enough of what they need so they can move on with their life, so they can go do whatever else they're trying to do. They need enough. Now, this is true for everybody, but your job people, they can be kind of a barometer for whether people are getting enough. But as long as they have enough, as long as what they're being compensated for is fair, as long as it's equitable, as long as it's market par for what they do, and it matches the level of investment they have in the position, great, that's perfect. A challenge with them is once you start demanding more commitment of them, there's a certain commitment threshold, doesn't matter how much you pay them, because you're asking too much. It's taken away from the rest of their life.
I do have another question.
Sure.
So have you ever seen a case where a career-driven or a career person transitions to a job person? And has that ever been due to things not related to life, but more so because of organizational culture?
Okay, so the question is, have I ever seen a career person transition into a job person for organizational things? I have. And it usually evolves around the character of the organization changing. For example, one of the key needs that a career person has to have is that clear path, right? They have to have clear, again, not necessarily easy, but clear opportunities to do other things and go other places. And if that vanishes or it becomes too difficult for them to suss that out, quite often they will withdraw from the organization a little bit and shift into job mode. Any guesses what their outside focus is? Finding another job. So they shift, they pull that discretionary effort back in, commit that to finding another job, and they shift into a job mode where they're going to do just what they need to do so that they can spend their time finding another job where those clear paths exist. Good question. Another one? No. All right, well, I believe we're up on time. Oh, yeah, sure.
You mentioned some regulations earlier on. Is that just for government, like not taking a computer home?
Well, there are certain employment laws, and I'm not a lawyer, but there are a lot of employment laws around in the government specifically. She was going against some computer law, some computer security regulations, some telework regulations, which are all part of Title V of the U.S. Code. But in any organization, there are laws about people being salaried. For example, salary doesn't mean as many hours as we can shove at you, here's what you're getting paid. Salary means, or being exempt just means you're not paid overtime. It doesn't mean you're not paid for additional work. And that can get into a lot of problem. If you have somebody who will brain themselves against their computer for 60 hours when the requirement of the job in the job description is 40 hours, that's 20 hours of additional pay you owe them. Now, you may have a regulation, and usually is, that the person doing the work and the organization have to agree to what that's going to be. And there can also be bargaining unit agreements. Bargaining unit agreements are another source where that calling people run afoul of, because bargaining unit agreements quite often specify exact specific work hours, exact specific working conditions, and neither the organization nor the individual can deviate from that. So it depends a lot on your environment, but those things do exist. Consult your HR team and lawyers and stuff like that if you want real specific questions. But yeah, I generally operate off the assumption if somebody's doing anything that's not the normal work expectations, there's a chance that they're either touching or maybe running right over the top of some rule, law, or regulation, given that I don't know too many companies and too many organizations in the U.S. that put a whole lot of slack between what the maximum allowable of the law is and what they can get away with. A lot of them, they're just smashed right together. Yeah. Yeah. Yep, true story. And it's going to be more with international collaborations and things like that you have to put in. And that'll be more, that's totally a little bit of a sidebar, but that'll be more about setting up boundaries for not what the availability expectations are per se, but what the participation expectations are. Like I have students all over the world. I am not sitting at my desk 24 hours a day. I block off time to go to the gym. I block off time to do things I need to do. My calendar technically operates 24 hours a day, but there's 8 hours a day in there where I'm not going to answer the phone unless it's an emergency because I'm sleeping. And that's on my calendar. So that'll become more of a thing. Sweet. Well, thank you everybody for playing along. I expect I will be around all day if you have other questions. I don't know what the next events are. They didn't give me those notes. I know there is food involved somewhere.
The next session is cruise control project, or seatbelts and cruise control for project management for mere mortals, and that'll begin in about 5 minutes.
All righty.